I'm Jason Houseworth, and I don't love titles, George, but I like to say that my role is to create the fastest path to the most value. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer at a company called OpenLane, which is based in Indianapolis. Think of us as the eBay of used cars. We're a dealer-to-dealer marketplace. I've worked with a lot of product managers across both, corporate and startup environments. One of the things that I hate the most about what product managers can do, they just start managing activities. And activity does not equal benefit or value. It's a trap, right? Product managers, value creators, they think about, how do I create value for the end user? How do I solve for their needs? I don't want people to be a manager. I prefer just the term value creator, just because that's what I expect people to pursue. I want you to create the fastest path to the most value. And what that means is you have to understand the user need you're solving for, and ultimately the value that you're creating for them.
Jason, thank you so much for joining the podcast today. I'm excited to throw it straight to you. Why don't you tell the folks a little bit more about you?
Well, I'm Jason Houseworth, and I like to say that I don't love titles, George, but I like to say that my role is to create the fastest path to the most value. I'm currently the Chief Product Officer at a company called OpenLane, which is based in Indianapolis and is actually the company that bought Backlot Cars, which is where I was the Chief Product Officer, and is really still the marketplace and the solution that I help build today. Think of us as the eBay of used cars. We're a dealer-to-dealer marketplace, and we sell wholesale vehicles. So,
fantastic. Okay, so let's tell a little bit of the backstory. How did you get into this world or into this type of role?
Well, I've been building software almost 30 years, and I started as an engineer, and I did that for about 10 years, and then I really had technology leadership positions, and that kind of took me from, I think building as an engineer is very different than building as a product leader. But I evolved as a P&L leader first at H&R Block. I led the tax software business, and when I led that business, I first led it because I was the chief technology officer, and then I started leading the business. And our growth initially was really because it was an online business primarily, and there were a lot of breakpoints in the funnel. So someone is an engineer and someone who understands, really the business from a data perspective, it was something that it made sense to me in terms of how to grow it. But at some point, the growth really, it needed to, or it really depended upon understanding what does the user need and how do we build a better solution. So we built a usability lab in the 13th and Main H&R Block headquarters, and we just started iterating with our users. And I would say during that period, about 10 years ago, I really became much more of a product focused leader. And I would say that kind of is really more where I kind of evolved into somebody that thinks of myself as just pursuing the fastest path to the most value.
I know you spend a lot of time mentoring and encouraging other up and coming product folks. I find that when I've been on this podcast that we've had as people tell that first story of where did you come into this? Your background being in engineering, but it kind of took a different constellation dot, right? It went from engineering up to P&L, like we're talking straight to business, and then kind of back out to product or to user. I'm curious about that path and what you think that you learned that brought kind of value to the full product story, because I've heard everything from I was a journalist and I got into product world to I was a designer and I went into the product world, and then of course the engineering route as well. What do you think that journey brought with you as you got into these types of roles?
I think one thing that is great about the people that we get to work with is just how diverse, the people are. I work with somebody who used to be a photographer and, a baker. There's some amazing people that we get the opportunity to collaborate with as builders, as people who build software. For me, I would say that, I was an engineer, and when I was at H&R Block, I actually wanted to use our tax software, and I hated it. I didn't. I mean, this was 2010, and I wanted to recommend it to my friends and say, hey, I'm leading this business, and I didn't like the experience, George. I thought it was really bad. And so
Yeah.
as I went through, there were even things where I would think, why do I have to scroll down every time to go page to page? I mean, the font was too big on the headers, some simple things. And so I think that for me was the first time where I really, thought about myself as like, this cannot be a business that is just run by engineers.
Yeah.
This has to be something that we think about in terms of every click from the perspective of, a user. And I think, then flipping to the other side of the table to the people that used to, give me requirements and realizing how they study user behavior, and I would say, beginning to just almost solely focus on that study of the user persona and behavioral economics and that type of thing. That was really, when I began to not only appreciate the profession, but the people who are really good at it. And now I mean, I think that that's one of the things that gets me up in the mornings, just the ability to mentor PMs and, to try to bring out the best in people, beginning with myself, which is that's what I would say is my, my motto, if you will, as a leader of, product managers.
So you said something interesting there, that there's something about folks that makes them really good at it. When you think about a product manager, a product owner, a product person, I know I want to, maybe we can go back to titles here in a second, because I'm curious about what your take on the ecosystem of titles is. But let's
Yeah.
start first with, let's just keep it generic, product. When you think about a great product person, you said there are those that are really good at it. What are some of the attributes about those folks, or the way they think, or what they do, that makes them great?
Well, I've worked with a lot of product managers across both, corporate and startup environments, and I think that, you know, why don't we talk about the things that I think are some of the biggest mistakes that I see
All
in
right.
product managers, and you're right. I mean, I don't like the title product manager, and it's really first because one of the things that I hate the most about what product managers can do when they're, I think it's the worst part of where they just become so focused in things is when they just start managing activities, because
Mm,
I feel like the product manager evolved out of the project manager,
yep.
and activity does not equal benefit or value. It doesn't. And I think that it's a trap, right? Because as a project manager, there are a lot of people that just kind of measure their output by just going down the checklist. And you get endorphins by kind of, everybody knows this, right? I did this, I did that. But that does not mean that what you're actually, just because you've done all those things, in many cases, you might have made the experience more complex for the end
Mm-hmm.
user.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, product managers and really value creators, they think about, how do I create value for the end user? How do I solve for their needs? So I don't want people to be a manager. And I don't love the term product, because product to me inherently feels like that it's something that we're creating, and not a solution for someone. I prefer just the term value creator, just because that's what I expect people to pursue. I mean, I want you to create the fastest path to the most value. And what that means is you have to understand the user need you're solving for, and ultimately, the value that you're creating for them. And when you see that spark of the, the first aspect of a fire that grows into something that is really a really valuable solution. So I think that's the first trap. And it's really, I think that was primarily product managers that they grew out of project, managers more in like the late 2000s.
Yeah.
And then I think, in the last 10 years, there's been a growth in the way that product managers use data. And
Mm.
so I would say the second trap, or the second thing that I feel like is a mistake PMs have, is when they let someone else interpret qualitative feedback or they're not, really hands-on when it comes to pursuing their own quantitative feedback or using tools to directly understand and find customer insights on their own. Um, I think that as a value creator, you've got to be the one that is listening. You're talking to customers. You're out there and you're watching them use the solution, or you're just watching, whatever it is that is even an ancillary need that they have. Those are the things that will spark innovation and go, whoa, why aren't we doing that for them? But you have to be there.
You
You
got to
have to
get your
be.
hands dirty.
Yeah, and it's the same way on data. I mean, I think that you need to be the one that is exploring the data and really like pulling the thread in Domo or Mixpanel and really, I mean, the tools that we have today in terms of segment and all the data that we capture, it's not something where you want somebody else to be then looking into that and then telling you, oh, okay, here we have. Don't get me wrong. I love partnering with data scientists and people who are much better than me in terms of doing a regression analysis and other advanced, evaluation. But I think in terms of just being able to like look at the data and understand, for me, a value creator is somebody that will first think about what is the metric that will define success for this user? What do we want to see? And then they're going to go in and like independently go in and evaluate how did we do. They're gonna set up. Let's work with the engineer to make sure that we're tracking it and that we're recording the event. And then they're going in and they're setting up the report to say, hey, did we actually realize that? That to me is where you have product managers that are really independent in gathering the qual, gathering or finding the insight. So I think that's the second thing. And I think the third thing, and this is really where we evolved to, where product managers are today, is that I think that AI is there. We've been talking about how to use it. I think the mistake that I see product managers making is where they just use it as a tool.
Yeah.
To me, I think really an unlock is, how do you think about AI where it's a teammate or it's like a collaboration partner? And I think you ask different things of AI and you like look at using it in different ways. If you're saying, oh, well, actually, instead of just, asking AI to summarize this, that's a tool. You're saying, okay, what questions should I be asking my users?
Yeah.
So these are different approaches, and I really think that they make a big difference in terms of like how effective a product manager or a value creator is in creating the fastest path to the most value.
So I want to pull on a couple of those threads though. So I love this because it's one of the things that I've said to a lot of the product managers that I've spent time with or worked with or mentored is that idea of get closer to the user, get closer to the problems that you're solving, get closer to it. But one of the feedback pieces that I get is I'm stepping on people's toes and
Yeah,
I'm stepping over their roles, so the data scientist has their purpose, their identity wrapped up in, no, it's my job to provide that to you, which then if anything, it just sets them back up on that really a project manager pedestal by nature of the cross-functional team around them saying, let us do this for you, quote unquote, and we'll put you up kind of where we want you, which is to be the coordinator. I wouldn't even say project manager. It's more of a project coordinator is what they end up being.
yeah.
And that's kind of even lesser value in some ways. But I'm curious how you combat that understanding or communicating to the entire team or organization, if for that matter, around putting that value creator or that value manager in the right mix so that they can participate and not and have respect or collaboration take place effectively across the team.
Yeah. I think it's a collaboration. I think you want actually everyone who is solving the problem to
Mm.
be as close to the user and to the data as possible, right? I don't think it's something where you want it to be filtered. I
Yeah.
think of
Yeah.
innovation as
Good.
being really simple if you know, take the people who are solving the need and you get them as close to the customer as possible, and then you shorten the iterations, right? Where you
Mm,
ultimately want, because I mean, listen, I fail all the time, but
mm,
each time, as long as I'm learning and I'm getting closer to it, well, then ultimately you can tell, okay, I'm getting closer. But if each iteration takes, I don't know, 6 months or 9 months, you're going to run out of oxygen to be able to
yeah.
get there.
Yeah.
But if you can release very quickly and learn along the way, then that to me is really how you can get there. You can innovate because you're staying really close, you're listening, and you're releasing a lot. And so I feel like those to me are the two keys to innovation. It's get really close to the problem and then iterate. Even when I was at H&R Block, there were issues with the team as far as there was a very large analytics department, and
Mm,
and part of that was kind of the brand research team, and
right.
so that was something that was difficult in terms of how do you ultimately like have that type of insight and have that input, but also just get the engineers and the product managers to watch behind the glass, because when you're watching someone, you know, do their own taxes and struggle with certain things, there's no summary from a brand research team that
Mm-mm.
can replicate that.
Yeah, that's really good. I'm curious.
And I also feel like, George, you're almost robbing them of some amazing. I think what is the best part of the job when you do that. I
Mm,
remember just think about the insights you've had when you've been with a customer and that light bulb has gone off.
yeah.
Like we were in a user group, and we had like a pizza night. We used to do pizza nights at H&R Block. We bring in customers, and we had a problem where we could not figure out why users did not want to enter the occupation field. This is a really stupid problem, but
Oh, interesting.
because the user registration page was one of the first in the funnel, solving that, then you can imagine, had a big impact from a conversion
Mhm.
perspective all the way down.
Yeah.
And so the most common page level error was, I don't, I won't enter my occupation. It's required by the IRS. You go, why do I have to enter it? So I think we had a drop down at one point. We had a free text entry, but it still was the biggest error.
Hmm.
And we were talking to our users, and I remember there was this guy, and he was he had just gotten off work. You could tell because he had like his nurse, scrubs or uniform on. And
Yeah.
he kind of raised his hand. He said, I don't know what to put in that field. Can
Hmm.
you guys tell me? Because I work two jobs,
Oh,
you know.
interesting. Yeah.
And George, how many of my PMs do you think could relate to that guy?
Yeah. Right.
So there was just a disconnect between like how we were trying to solve the problem and what we needed to solve. And we actually looked into it, and in our research, about 2/3 of the people who filed taxes with us had a second job. So they didn't
Huh.
they didn't know what to put into that field,
Yeah.
right? These are the kinds of things that like you really have to be there. And when you get it, I remember the team walked out and they were like, "Oh my gosh,"
Yeah. How
it,
did we not see it before? Right. Yeah. Exactly.
but it was so exciting,
Yeah.
and I think that's also something that, like, when you have those unlocks, when you're watching and you're listening, I mean, that's one of the greatest joys you have doing this job. And so I also feel like that's something you want the team to have.
So it's interesting. You're talking about that level of, in some ways, where I was going to go with this in my head was, you've been in the startup environment, you've been a part of
Yeah.
startup product teams, which I think that is where people assume you have way more permission to get closer to the problem, closer to the user, because there's no one else. It's just us, right? We're a small team. We're getting close to it because we have the permission to. When you get up into that enterprise environment, there starts to be infrastructure and lots of human beings involved and bureaucracy and everything else that keeps you away from the customer. But what you just described there was actually kind of a startup-esque experience inside a large enterprise environment.
I think I strongly believe that, even if you're call it working for a large enterprise, you got to think like an entrepreneur. You got to think small, and that's why I to me, even as a product manager, your part of the solution is still very small, right?
Mm,
And
mm.
understanding who uses it and trying to, be with them to watch how do they use it and to evaluate the data so you actually know what they did when they were using it. That to me is where you've got to think really small.
I
And
think that's
there's
huge. And I think people struggle to do that, honestly,
yeah.
because at a
Oh,
certain
yeah.
point
And I think they also wait for permission, right? They're like, well, I
Mm,
think that I need to, when George tells me, like, and that's, I think, a little bit of the environment where you get into. And again, it's the, I'm the manager and I'm going to kind of like, I've got a certain protocol. I've got activities that I've got to, and the thing is that ultimately, if you're focused on the fastest path to the most value, you're going to be focused on solving for the needs of your customer. And,
mhm,
and, and
mhm.
I think that if you're not close to the data, if you're not close to them, then you're going to say, well, wait a second, how do I get close to them? And
Yeah.
that to me is just reframing what are your responsibilities and how, what do you need to do in order to be successful?
You mentioned it, but AI is coming into the conversation obviously a lot more now.
Yeah.
That fastest path to the most value, where are you seeing either internally in the way that your teams leverage it for themselves or the way that you're thinking about actually allowing AI to be a tool that gets you closer to the user? Where are you seeing the biggest impact internally or externally with AI?
Well, I think we're still learning. I don't
Sure,
think
we
that,
all are.
there's a formula yet. If you have one, George, let me know.
I'll churn it into an e-course and sell it to everybody.
I mean, we could actually have AI create an e-course on
That's
AI,
right.
and that would be a way to learn.
Oh, it's
Uh,
happening. Trust me. There's a bunch of that out there right now.
but okay, but let's talk a few examples.
Yeah. Yeah.
Last week, there's a colleague of mine, a member of my team, who we are trying to build an agent to be able to ask the documentation that we have. Think about it through a notebook LM, where we can
Mhm.
just take the documentation that we have and then create like a Slack bot to say, hey, I'm going to ask any question I want about the product. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that the documentation we have is really good. And in a startup, we have very little documentation. So what we've been asking is, okay, where are the gaps? And one of the gaps was this piece of very complex logic, and we actually, using our code base, we actually ask AI to summarize the code base, and it was incredibly accurate. So something that I don't want to do, I don't know
Yeah.
that anybody
Yeah.
likes to document how things work.
Right.
We're using AI to do that. And that's accelerating the way that we work because we need that and it will make us faster in order to make sure that we're not spending time. Okay, well, let's take our engineers to help us go through the code and figure out how this no. Like let's have AI summarize that and then that way we can move on. We can focus on how we're going to improve it. So I think that's a very real world example and it's one that I'm excited that is going to help us get better as a team in the next few months as we kind of use that for a number of areas. So that's one. I think in terms of AI, I have a hypothesis that if my team is using it, then we're going to get better at finding ways to actually integrate it into our marketplace. So my goal right now is just how do I have practical solutions like that where my team is ultimately using it and then I think we're going to have a better marketplace.
You've seen a lot of the CPOs, CEOs of at least the tech companies coming out and kind of almost making a requirement, right? Saying, hey, we're going to even evaluate you on the usage of your AI. And I think that
Well,
their
you can
intent,
measure literally how much I'm using it. So
right? Right, exactly, right. We can see token usage or we can see these outputs, right? And I
yeah,
think while I mean at least my company hasn't gone yet that far, the encouragement is the same, but it is a little bit of a tension right now, right? Because we're still in this space, like you said, where we're learning quickly. So there is a there's a need to figure out trust, right? Like what do I trust from what it does, or what do I trust that it can do that isn't a threat to me, or that enhances me that doesn't replace me. And so we're in this very strange, but also exciting time where you're going to have the early adopters, those folks that are far more like, why not? I'll give it a go. And then you're going to
yeah,
have those folks that are like, I need to understand the value, right? And so there's a little bit more time to kind of speed up to that. I assume, given that you've got a really diverse team, that there's probably all ends of that spectrum as you're working with folks as well, right?
Yeah, but I think that you're going to need to embrace AI as a collaboration tool, as a teammate, in order to collaborate, in order to prototype, and again to accelerate your work. But if you think about what we've talked about so far, George, in terms of understanding the needs of the user,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and then like pulling on strings, asking the right questions in the data, AI cannot do that. if
Mm.
you if you are close to the user and close to their needs and are a very good listener, and you're really good in terms of not only leveraging AI, but able to analyze data and look at what the users are doing, then AI becomes a collaboration partner to accelerate your ability to prototype and say, oh, well, would this work? And again, it just increases the cycles of being able to do hypothesis testing. So for me, the the value creators, the product managers that leverage AI as a collaboration partner, they're going to be the ones that just go faster than everybody else. And those are people that I want to learn from, and that I want to work with.
Fastest path to value creation.
That's right. Yeah, absolutely.
What's something that you see, and we talked about this a little bit before, but when we go back to we imagine that we get rid of all product titles. That's where we're going to start right first, is we just get rid of all the titles. But we go to this value creation idea. Where do you think there's risks in, maybe even as we start to paint the picture for this utopia of where there's faster hypothesis, faster iterations, better value creation? Where do you think there's risks in that people might slip off in a different direction and get things wrong? Or maybe where have you seen it where the intent was good, right?
Yeah.
They intended to get closer. They were listening to the user. They were sitting right there, but they just weren't doing X, and that's where we saw the problems fall off the tracks.
Well, I mean, I think this isn't like a hallucinations kind of AI, like a technical problem. I think it's more, these are things where we still have to be careful in terms of, like, we use AWS Bedrock, where we're being very careful in terms of making sure that we're not using, or allowing our content to go on the, on the broader web.
Yeah.
So you got to be very careful in terms of how you're using it in an enterprise way,
Yeah.
because it's still like proprietary content.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
I think that for our team, we're still very much sharing and learning and embracing it, because there are some people that I think are concerned about the way that, if you think of, I mean, it's natural. If I'm an engineer and if I've created a solution, let's say I've been working on it for 5-7 years, do I want AI to directly update my code?
Right.
Do I know everything that it's doing? Those are things where I can understand the hesitation, but what about writing test automation? What are the things
Yeah.
that I
Yeah.
don't like
Huge.
doing that it can accelerate? So again, I think it's really not thinking about what the harm it can cause, but rather what are the things that I don't like to do that it will do really well, and embracing it, and then doing it in a way that is right for your organization, that is right for your team.
So let's go back to the team then.
Yeah.
Where are there areas that you feel like teams get in their own way, right? So there is the thing that they find themselves slipping into, where they go, man, again, the intent is good. They get your mission of value creation. Maybe they even are getting closer to the user, but they just still continue to just get in their own way. Where there's, over the course of your career, where have you seen people kind of go, man, your intent was good, but now we're back to there. I'm having this conversation again, or maybe even in your mentoring, right? Because
Yeah.
this is about bringing people up, and as you know, you can tell a person something with their first. I have kids, right? I have to remind them often.
A lot like being a parent, right?
Right, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's true. I think being a parent makes you a better people leader. So,
Yeah,
but I think within a team, you have to really work every day on culture.
yeah.
And have you ever seen or read anything about Google's Project Aristotle?
Yes, but remind me.
Okay, so the New York Times has a great article in which they summarized it, kind of Google search for a perfect team. But basically, all they found, well, do you think that the perfect team had the smartest people?
Right. No.
And was it the overachievers? No, it actually it was, made up of the people who were really good at a couple things. They were really good at like understanding, um, are people kind of talking in the same proportion to one another? Meaning,
Hmm.
is everyone involved?
Yeah.
And are people really good at reading other people and therefore like understanding, oh, George is being really quiet. What's going on? Let me dig into that. So the best teams were really good at, call it psychological safety,
Yeah.
meaning they all trusted one another. And
Hmm.
in an environment where people trust one another, guess what happens? You feel like I can take risks. I can raise, like maybe a challenge and I feel like this isn't going to work. And here's why, even though I'm, whatever my title is and it's below whatever somebody else's title is that maybe I'm sitting next to. So promoting psychological safety, especially in a virtual world, is really hard.
Yeah.
And I think it's something that you have to intentionally work on. I think it's something that as a leader, I think about every day to make sure that my team is collaborating and that we ultimately are, like challenging each other to build excellent solutions. That's
That
really hard.
that intentionality and challenge is really difficult. Although I've experienced that in the culture of our company, where I'm an optimist to a fault, and I'm also an external processor. So I'm always putting a lot of content out into the space. I have to learn to dial that back out to give space for others, right? And that's something where you talk about creating environments for trust. But I was really encouraged on midway through our journey here at Crema was that I actually had somebody say, "Hey George, you're you're creating an environment where everybody's chasing all your ideas." And I said, I didn't even know I was putting out that many ideas. They said, yeah, well, every time you talk, they think you have got a new idea that you need to do something with. And it was, but the whole premise of that story wasn't a fact that obviously I had something I needed to work on, but was that they felt like there was a safe enough environment to give me the feedback that I was doing that.
Yeah.
Right. It's kind of going back to the parenting thing. I have
And that's
teenagers,
like
right?
that's a very personal thing to kind of say to your leader, your founder, right? It's
Right.
like, I mean, to say that to you, that takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of safety to feel like I can do that. So
And on the
that's awesome.
other end of that spectrum, we've had seasons where, things were not going perfectly at Crema. And like I said, I'm usually the optimist to the fault. And I happen to be in a glass office sitting there rubbing my face. And somebody opens the door and says, "Hey, what's going on? Are you okay? Like, this isn't normal."
Yeah,
And again, that ability to have a space or an environment where there's trust enough that you can check in and also challenge, and also whoever, anyone in the environment, both top to bottom, that's very difficult. It's very uncomfortable if you're not used to it. But the effectiveness, back to that value creation, is that everyone's here to do the best work of their lives. Right. And so they're all going, "Hey, let's figure out what's keeping us from
yeah.
rowing in the same direction right now."
One thing that actually became a huge career unlock for me as like a product leader, was I got a chance to go through a design thinking course at Stanford. Okay,
Oh, very cool.
and the guy who taught it was he was actually an improvisational acting coach. So you're like, oh, what is this? But one of the things that he said, because he's got this group of corporate leaders from all over the world in it. He was like, you guys are failing if you think that you have to come up with the ideas.
Right.
He goes, here's the thing, is your job is actually to find the tiny treasure chest that's hidden in all of your people that has the ideas to grow your company. And it was like arresting. I think I had always had this pressure to think that like I have to ultimately come up with the big idea, and I've got like a dozen patents, and so it's not to say that I'm not always
You
telling
have
myself,
ideas. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
think, but almost all of them are with somebody else, meaning
Right.
that you're partnering with someone and you're having this dialogue and it's always, together, right? Where you're pulling things from them. And I think if you think about it that way, I think it completely like redefines your role as a leader in a creative environment.
And it goes back to what we talked about at the beginning, which as you started to kind of define what makes a good product leader of this ability to get closer to the problems, to the value, ability to collaborate well with your peers, ability to use the tools, whether it's AI or software or data or whatever it is, and then ultimately build trust around you where we can say, hey, we're going to do this together. I mean, that's a company I want to work for. I'll just say that, let alone a team that probably is going to get incredible results.
Yeah. That's the team that I want to be on.
Okay, Jason, I always like to end on a high note. That was pretty high, so I'm not sure we could top that. But what's something you're looking into the future? The future feels like it's much closer than it used to be. It used to I feel like it used to be that we look out in the future and say, what's the next 5 to 10 years? Now it's like, maybe the future is like 3 to 6 months. But whatever the future is for you, whatever the horizon is for you, what are you looking ahead and going, I'm really excited about this potential future, whether it's in your ecosystem, your role, your company, or the marketplace at large, or the world at large? What's something that you look out ahead and you go, I'm pretty excited about this?
I think I'm very excited about the ability for product managers to prototype in near real time in terms of being able to like how many sessions have you been in where people have a good idea and they're like, oh my gosh, it's going to take so long to build, like and I'll give you an example. This makes me so excited. My son, he's 21. He just finished his junior year at the Milwaukee School of Engineering, Ethan Houseworth. He is a DJ and a music creator, producer. And so there was a site he was using in order to upload his music. And I don't know, there are hundreds of labels on the site. So how does he find the right one? Does he upload it to all of them? How does he know if they respond, if they even listen to it? So he's on this site. He thinks this site sucks, and I'm paying for it. So what did he do? I mean, he built a new one, and he did it iteratively using several, generative AI tools. And he's studying software engineering, but he did it in like 6 hours, and then he, created a version. He showed to me, and I think within a few days he had a beta that he was sharing with like a Reddit thread of people that were also complaining about this site. And then within, a few weeks, he had a paid version based on their feedback that he was upselling people and kind of had $100 in monthly recurring revenue.
I saw
And
your post on that. I was so pumped.
I
So
mean,
cool.
as a parent, that's,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
to see, because Ethan, he's a technical engineer, but to see somebody who understands how to build software, but
Yeah.
to then be able to create something that solved a need so quickly,
Mm-hmm.
and get feedback on it and know the parts that, it's just kind of a tool that people aren't interested in, and also understand, what are the parts that made people go, yeah, that's valuable enough that I want to pay for it. To be able to iterate like that in days because of generative AI, that's really exciting, George. And I think that, you think about the solutions that, very small teams are going to be able to build. It's so exciting to me.
I heard somebody say recently that the term scope creep might actually start to fade out of vocabulary because there's no constraint within what we can make now.
I think there's a
in the sense,
constraint. I think the constraint is if you are ultimately just chasing feature build, and if you're chasing the stuff that you think is good, then again. But if you are really dialed in, to the user needs, oh my gosh, I mean, we're going to see some amazing solutions be built that are going to, absolutely take out major, like enterprise solutions today. And this is going to happen, very quickly.
Well, I'm here for it. I think you are as well.
Yeah.
Jason, every time I spend time with you, I'm both encouraged and challenged and inspired. So, as I say to many folks, thank you for doing very good and intentional work. I know a lot of folks that have either worked for you or worked around you, and the reputation goes before you. So, thank you for all that you do. And thanks for coming on the podcast today. We ran out of time way too fast because this is just too rich of content. Next time we'll do it for we'll do like a Joe Rogan style, like 3 hours of us just nerding out
Sure.
on it. But
I want to take this opportunity to thank you because you created the people product community in Kansas City in order to have dialogue between people who are value creators and who are trying to, solve big problems. And I appreciate that because that's been a great part of what I look forward to as a person in people product. And so thank you. That has been fantastic.
It's very kind. It's one of my favorite things to do. So this is just another byproduct of it. And I love these conversations. So again, Jason, thank you so much. Where can people learn more about you or find you online?
Yeah, just look at, on LinkedIn. Easy to find. Jason Houseworth. I'm Chief Product Officer of OpenLane in the U.S.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for coming on the podcast today.
Really, my pleasure, George.
People of Product is brought to you by Crema, a design consultancy that helps forward-thinking leaders discover, understand, and execute on their greatest opportunities. Learn more at crema.us.